Once they get into a feeding frenzy, they don't stop at people, but they'll eat part of the boat as well.
We add a name to the great dogs of legend, the hero of a true story.
Absolutely frightening when you see this thing. It just rose up out of the water. It was like a greyish colour, but it was absolutely frightening.
How did a family dog cheat death after a snake attack? And what lives beneath South Africa's Howik Falls? Animal X reveals the bizarre world of animal mystery. First to Indonesia, home to huge man-eating crocodiles that defy the laws of nature.
Enter the lost world. A land where giant prehistoric beasts prey on innocent villagers, stalking them as they go about their daily tasks. This is Irian Jaya in Southeast Asia, where killer crocodiles over 9 meters long have been blamed for the deaths of more than 50 men, women, and children.
Big crocodile like that can swallow a human being whole. I've seen photographs of crocodiles that have been opened up with people laying whole in the stomach. I've also seen pictures of stomachs of crocodiles of that size with 2 outboard motors in there as well. So once they get into a feeding frenzy, they don't stop at people, but they'll eat part of the boat as well.
Animal X mounted an expedition into the land that time forgot to investigate the incredible reports of ferocious crocodiles. Our trek took us deep into the inhospitable Asmat jungle in southern Irian Jaya, where we discovered a rich and superstitious culture revolving around spirits, myths, and legends. Here, headhunting and cannibalism have been part of tribal life for centuries. Elaborate rituals lead up to the slaying, beheading, and eating of members of opposing villages, and what are considered local vengeance killings. The Asmats believe everything has a spirit, from trees to rocks to animals. These dark and mysterious parts are also home to flying bats and the world's largest lizard, the Komodo dragon, whose saliva alone is enough to kill. But by far the most feared of them all is the killer croc. And as a powerful animal, the locals believe it has a very powerful spiritual force.
And they would explain the fact that somebody got eaten by a crocodile because it's the will of the gods. Person done something wrong, so it's good and right they get eaten by a crocodile.
This is all that remains of one killer croc reported to have eaten up to 20 people. These huge holes once held teeth 20 centimeters long. The story goes, not even a high-powered rifle could kill the animal. The croc's skull is proudly displayed in a museum in the Asmat. The curator tells how by chance, a child fired an arrow straight into its eye. The crocodile, in tremendous pain, fled up onto the land. Local villagers eventually killed it with arrows and spears, believing that by taking its life, they inherited a powerful spiritual force. Those who've seen Irian Jaya's killer crocs in action say they move like lightning. Witnesses describe how the animals have even chased people in their canoes, biting through the small boats or flipping them over. No one knows exactly why they're so ferocious. Some believe it's just a case of the croc being hungry and looking for the easiest source of food. The word Asmat means tree or wood, and many here are carvers who produce some of the primitive world's most awesome and powerful sculptures. Animal X spoke to them about their experiences with killer crocs. This man tells how 4 people, including his sister-in-law, were taken from a nearby village. He says the crocs were so big and the attacks happened so fast, no one had a chance to defend themselves or escape. It was back in 1961 that this land of artists and headhunters made front-page news with the disappearance of the son of the fabulously wealthy New York governor, Nelson Rockefeller. Michael Rockefeller vanished while on a personal mission to collect Asmat wood carvings. On a fateful day in November, he and a Dutch companion found themselves floating away from shore in a sinking boat. His colleague chose to stay on board, but Rockefeller was confident he could make it back. His friend watched as the 23-year-old swam off into the distance. Eventually, he lost sight of Rockefeller, and the New Yorker was never seen again. The Dutchman was finally rescued, but he could shed no light on what happened to Rockefeller. Theories vary. Some believe he was taken by headhunters, but others blame Irian Jaya's prehistoric killer, the killer croc, who may have taken Rockefeller's body deep below the surface.
The way the crocodile feeds, basically, is to bite, and then if it's large prey, if it's a human being, for example, or a buffalo, it'll drag the animal into the water. If it's not feeding immediately, it will take the animal down and lodge it down in the mangrove roots and leave it there till it starts to decompose, which makes it easier to pull apart. But I mean, either way, the crocodile will bite and then use its body and its tail to start spinning. So it wrenches, it rips off the food by spinning in the water.
Living along one of the world's biggest mangrove swamps means there's little chance of escaping the crocs. Today, the Asmats rarely hunt them. They believe to do so would upset the balance of the animal spirit world. So for now, these giant predators are free to lurk around the waters of Irian Jaya, stalking villagers and killing at will.
Killers in the animal kingdom come in all shapes and sizes. In Australia's bushy terrain, it's easy to miss those that are long and thin and slither along the ground. But here's a story of a perceptive canine who sensed their danger, moved in to save a life, although he almost lost his.
Would you depend on this dog to save a child's life? Well, the Silky Terrier probably wouldn't be your first choice. But Fiso's courage and instinct for danger go well beyond the normal and earned him Australia's highest award for animal bravery, the Purple Cross. Animal X travelled to Fiso's home, Taree, on the New South Wales coast to relive his near-fatal ordeal. One afternoon, just like this, Fiso was hard at work, looking after his favourite 11-year-old, Rachel Sky. He too was supposed to be on holiday, but for Fiso, duty is a 24-hour job. Today, Fiso will need all his courage because somewhere in the grass, there's an unwelcome visitor, one of the most venomous snakes in the world, the eastern brown. The eastern brown snake can kill a child with one bite. It's highly dangerous and very aggressive if cornered, striking quickly and repeatedly.
We're making nests in the long grass where Grandad had freshly cut it and he put it in a big pile. We eventually saw the snake.
Fiso immediately sensed the danger and threw himself between Rachel and the snake. It should have been no contest, a small family pet against one of Australia's most highly evolved reptiles, packing enough venom to kill a horse. But in a furious battle, Fiso would not give up. The snake too stood his ground. It would be a fight to the death.
The seemed that he was trying to rip it in half.
Fiso got in a final fatal bite. The snake was dead, but the snake had struck many times, injecting the little dog with deadly venom. Fiso had won the battle, but was dying. The venom was starting to take effect, flooding his little body with paralyzing speed.
Venom acts in different ways on different parts of the body. The commonest is usually neurotoxic venom, which attacks the transmission of nerve impulses, which often leads to respiratory or cardiac failure. But there are other types of venom as well, which attack muscle, for example.
Fiso was rushed to the vets 15 minutes away. Every second brought him closer to a fatal coma.
The scene was confusion. The whole sort of family were there, the children were crying. Fiso was absolutely collapsed. His gums were nearly purple. He was having trouble breathing.
Incredibly, Fiso was battling the poison, a much tougher opponent than the snake. But he had an ally. Australia is one of the world's best producers of snakebite antivenom. At the Australian Reptile Park in Sydney, captive snakes are regularly milked of their poison. This forms the basis for an antidote.
Fortunately, in this case, we had an identification of the snake because Fiso brought it in with him, been killed. It was a brown snake, and we commenced very quickly brown snake antivenom after necessary pre-treatment to prevent against allergic reaction and other supportive treatment, which is usually rapid intravenous fluids, try and keep their circulation going.
Fiso spent the night on life support and the next 3 days in intensive care.
Come on, get up, Fiso.
It was touch and go, but they don't come much tougher than this little fighter, and amazingly, he survived. As Fiso recovered, news of his bravery reached the RSPCA, and 6 months later, at a special ceremony in State Parliament House, Fiso met Premier Bob Carr and was presented with the Purple Cross.
We add a name to the great dogs of legend, the hero of a true story.
Today, Fiso does just what he likes doing most, lazing around. But beneath this doggy calm exterior beats the heart of a lion.
Just as there are mysteries involving real-life animals, there are tales of beasts built up around myth and legend. After the break, Animal X investigates South Africa's Inkanyamba.
Next thing, this thing broke water and I just couldn't believe my eyes. It was actually made the water ripple. It is so great. This is a beautiful animal.
Welcome back to Animal X. In Scotland, they have the Loch Ness Monster. In South Africa, it's the Inkanyamba, a legendary creature said to live somewhere beneath the Howik Falls. It's an apt setting for an otherworldly beast, as there's more to this place than meets the eye.
South Africa's eerie Howik Falls are the most photographed waterfalls in the country, but they also have a more grisly reputation for death and evil. Countless people have hurled themselves down the massive drop to their death. The allure of the falls for the desperate and lonely is notorious, but even more mysterious are the reports of a strange monster that lurks in the murky pool below, a creature known as Inkanyamba.
It was huge in size. It must have been maybe 7-8 meters long.
But the one I saw had beautiful big red eyes in the moonlight.
Animal X traveled to the South African province of Kwa-Zulu in search of the Inkanyamba, the Howik Falls Monster. 2 years ago, Bob Teeny and his friend Richard got more than they bargained for when they visited Howik Falls. The pair trod the familiar path to the bottom of the falls, a track that local tribes people are too frightened to take for fear of encountering the giant snake monster. It was here that things took a turn for the extraordinary. First, they noticed bubbles rising to the surface of the water. Then, slowly, the huge head and neck of a strange creature began to emerge.
It's absolutely frightening when to see this thing. It just rose up out of the water. It was like a greyish colour, but it was absolutely frightening.
Bob Teeney managed to take a photograph of the monster before he and his colleague fled for their lives. Bob Teeney displays the photograph in his restaurant in Howik as indisputed proof that a monster lurks at the falls. The image shows the long neck of an animal not unlike a prehistoric plesiosaur.
We actually have the monster out of the water, and we're not afraid to show it, nor are we afraid to say to the skeptics that we are 100% sure that this is a genuine photograph.
Bob Teeney offers the negative as proof of the photograph's authenticity, but he believes he has further evidence of the existence of the monster, 3 large eggs.
So here we have just a normal hen's egg, and this is one of the eggs which was actually taken from down at the bottom of the falls.
Experts have cast doubt on the assertion that these were laid by a falls monster.
In my opinion, I'd say definitely one of the crocodile egg for sure.
There are no crocodiles at Howik Falls, and Bob Teeney remains convinced that a giant prehistoric reptile lives in the deep caverns behind the cascading waters, hauling itself out of the water to lay its eggs, or perhaps foraging for food in the dense bushland in the dead of night. He's not the only one. Other local residents are convinced they've seen the monster.
It was midnight, full moon, beautiful, man. And with the spotlights on, shining onto the falls there, I saw this movement in the water and big red eyes coming up the river, and I wondered what the thing this thing is. Next thing, this thing broke water, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. It was actually made the water ripple. It is so great. This is a beautiful animal.
Brian Fowley has fashioned a miniature version of the creature he saw that night. Was it the monster the local people call Inkanyamba? A creature so feared that few will even venture to the bottom of the falls for risk of encountering it. Only witch doctors who are believed to possess supernatural powers are allowed to visit the home of the snake monster and risk the wrath of the Inkanyamba. But first, a special ceremony must take place. A bead from the witch doctor's headdress is thrown into the pool to appease the spirits of the ancestors that live in the monster.
Inkanyamba is a terrible, it's a big, terrible snake that people are frightened, are scared to see it because the snake is related with the ancestors.
The Zulu tribes people are deeply superstitious. The spirits of the dead take many shapes and forms. Evil spirits are blamed for a catalog of problems, and it is up to the traditional healers, or sangomas, to exorcise the evil spirits and drive out illness and bad fortune. The spirits that lurk in the Inkanyamba are respected as well as feared for their relationship with the ancestors. Anyone who visits the pool risks being dragged down to the depths by the Inkanyamba. According to folklore, a white goat must be sacrificed to the spirit of the mystical snake monster to spare the life of anyone unfortunate enough to see the Inkanyamba. Cows have also been sacrificed in the name of the snake monster. According to local folklore, a sighting is also guaranteed to bring rain. The legend of the giant snake goes back thousands of years, even before the Zulus arrived in the area 2 millennia ago. Deep in the Drakensberg Range, there is evidence of the giant snake's place in local mythology. Cave paintings by Bushmen who lived here thousands of years ago bear witness to battles with giant serpents and of sacrifices to the mystical snake. Tales of the monster weave a mythical web across the waterfalls of southern Africa. Flying snakes form an integral part of the folklore. The stories have been handed down through the generations and even across the cultures, from Bushmen to Zulus.
We see today
When you speak to Sangomas and other traditionalists, it's most probably a remnant or survival of these earlier beliefs, which have been depicted on rock paintings.
The giant snake is more than just a legend for some. Tuboy Mabenzi has lived in the area for 14 years. As a youngster, he ignored the warnings of his parents and visited the pool at the bottom of the falls. Tuboy claims that he saw a long-necked monster rising from the water. The creature had a head like a tortoise, a neck that stretched 5 meters long, and skin like a crocodile. Then it disappeared back into the mist. This is the image that is indelibly etched in his mind. The Incanyamba has also been blamed for the death of several children near the waterfall.
Lots of people, young children, died there, but the young people will come back and report to their parents, we saw a big snake taking so and so. This is how this used to happen, but many children died. At this stage, no one swims there because they're all scared of that place.
Local witch doctors have long recognized the mystical nature of the area, but the falls have also held a powerful attraction for others. Suiciders.
Perhaps people in a heightened emotional state are more sensitive and more open to this atmosphere. Perhaps they're drawn to the falls, even lured over the lip, and perhaps this could account for the many suicides that have occurred at the Howik Falls since the beginning of the century and before.
Sian Hall has done extensive research on the mysterious Howik Falls. She's found evidence of huge eels lurking at the bottom.
They are said to be about 2 meters long, with quite a thick circumference, and bodies that have been washed over the falls, or people that have leapt over the falls, have surfaced a few days later with their extremities sort of removed, and this is most possibly being done by these eels.
Howik Falls isn't alone in possessing an almost supernatural aura. Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe holds its own special allure. The Great Lakes of Central Africa also have a mystical power that transfixes visitors. But is it just the hypnotic sound of the cascading water that draws people to the edge of Howik Falls? Or does the monster call them to jump? While the monster of Howik Falls is deeply ingrained in local folklore, those who claim to have seen the Incanyamba say it's more than a myth. It's a very real and terrifying creature.
It's said there are stranger things in heaven and earth than we can think of.
Big crocodile like that can swallow a human being whole.
I reckon he'd have to be the best dog in the entire world.
You've just seen some of them on Animal X.